Welcome to today's Explainer. Okay, so today we're doing something a little different. We're stepping into a completely forgotten realm, a place where the very starlight has already begun this long, slow decline into crystal. We're not just unpacking some dusty philosophical text today, we are going to witness an event where the very grammar of reality is violently rewritten. Let's dive into the genealogy of friction, a fable of the will to power, and watch what happens when two massive cosmic forces decide to test the limits of reality on a sleeping city.
Now, to really grasp the sheer scale of this fable, we got to redefine a term that, let's be honest, usually feels incredibly dry and academic: philology. Normally, it's the study of old, well, actually, scratch that. In our story, it's not a dry study of texts at all. It is an active, violent battleground of meaning. It's the study of how every sign, every law, every price tag, and every single concept of ownership is constructed, temporarily held together, and then ultimately destroyed. Our entire fable is basically a massive philological quarrel over where signs come from and where they're doomed to end up.
So picture this. Hovering above a wizard's altar, you've got these two opposing cosmic forces. First, you have the spirit of negation. This is the pure, unfiltered urge toward absolute erasure. It wants to reduce every sign to total silence, freezing every possibility into a blank page. It basically argues that all language has to return to the void. But then, fighting against it, you have its antithesis, the spirit of chaotic becoming. This is a purely Dionysian, neon vortex of endless flux. It refuses to let anything settle, constantly splitting and merging meaning, treating every letter as just a temporary mask for deeper drives. It's a classic Fichtean dialectic, right? Thesis and antithesis, battling it out over whether meaning should be totally erased or infinitely chaotically interpreted. And sitting right between these two warring spirits are two incredibly powerful artifacts that for a time pretended to stabilize meaning. You've got an elderwood cane and a dragon glass scroll. Now, as the clashing energies of negation and chaotic becoming literally leak into these objects, they begin to transform. The spirits quickly realize neither can claim total ownership over them, so what do? They decide to share them. They cast these instruments down into the sleeping city below as a pure, unfiltered experiment in the will to power. They want to test their absolute forces on the much weaker material of human civilization.
Take the elderwood cane, for example. It physically embodies this philosophical nightmare. Its base freezes into absolute ice, which perfectly represents the Apollonian extreme, where form and structure become so incredibly rigid that they harden right past the point of life. But then, the crown of the cane sprouts these wild, erratic crystal blossoms. That's the Dionysian excess. It's the internal, chaotic pressure that shatters fixed forms entirely from within. So the cane is literally this walking tension between strict order and overwhelming chaos.
And this brilliantly illustrates what actually happens when these metaphysical heavyweights strike the mortal world. The clashing forces create this synthesis of friction that completely dismantles the fundamental truths of society. We're going to look at three very specific victims in this city and watch how the bedrock concepts they rely on, property, commerce, and law, are utterly destroyed, leading to a terrifying kind of absolute freedom. Let's follow these artifacts as they hit the alleyways, the bazaar, and finally, the high court.
Okay, so let's start in the alleyways the artifacts land, and their first target is a notorious thief. Instantly, the spirit of negation strips away all of the thief's residual fear of the law. It just totally erases that last lingering bit of herd instinct keeping him cautious. But at the exact same moment, chaotic becoming floods his brain with 1,000 simultaneous heist plans. Totally devoid of guilt and overflowing with endless chaotic possibility, the thief just strolls into the Grand Plaza to commit a crime unlike anything the world has ever seen.
But here's the crazy part. He doesn't just steal gold. No, he steals the physical shadows off the buildings. He literally steals the sound of the church bells, packing them all into a bag that somehow stretches toward infinity. I mean, think about why this matters. Shadows and sounds are the ultimate residual signs of physical presence. By stealing them, the thief is treating the real world like a text, where meanings can just be cut out and rearranged. He's enacting a pure will to power by totally revaluing what even counts as property. For one night, he becomes a philologist of reality itself, rewriting the rules of the world based purely on his own strength, completely ignoring societal custom.
Meanwhile, the smoke from that dragon glass scroll drifts over into the bazaar. And here, we meet victim number 2, the market man. Negation goes right to work, entirely erasing his capacity to feel guilt, silencing that internalized voice of the herd. Simultaneously, chaotic becoming targets the very tools he uses to make a living. His weights and measures just start shifting shape every single second. Suddenly, an apple weighs exactly as much as a giant boulder. A basic copper coin explodes into a swarm of golden butterflies and just vanishes into thin air.
So what does he do? The market man starts screaming lies that instantly manifest as facts. He's selling invisible silks. He's trading the actual color of his own eyes for stardust. It is a profoundly Dionysian revelation. Think about it. Measure, or weighing things fairly, is basically our oldest moral metaphor for justice. But when the scales themselves turn to fluid, we suddenly realize that every fixed price, every single concept of commercial morality is just a temporary fiction that we maintain out of collective weakness. In this total absence of guilt, trade reveals itself as what it really is, a naked, inventive, and completely unashamed expression of power.
Finally, this metaphysical madness creeps all the way up to the high court. Here we encounter the judge, the ultimate arbiter of the city's rules. The spirit of negation completely wipes his memory clean of all written law. Now, law is arguably our most elaborate philological construction, right? It's this massive system of signs that pretends to stand perfectly still while the rest of the world is constantly in flux. But with that memory totally erased, chaotic becoming rushes into the void, filling the judge's mind with absolute, unpredictable whimsy.
The judge doesn't just go rogue. He becomes a pure interpreter without a text. I mean, he literally sentences the cobblestones to prison. He declares the sky guilty of treason. He ordains the thief and the market man as the absolute rulers of the city. He transforms into what Nietzsche called a free spirit. He's someone who no longer needs the old, dusty tablets of law because he can actually feel the raw, creative will that originally carved them. His legal sentences are no longer boring applications of some rigid code. They are dynamic, terrifyingly fresh acts of pure creation.
And through all of this, high above, those two cosmic spirits are just watching this nonsensical collapse with absolute amusement. And this is where our fable takes a really dark turn away from traditional stories. There is no heroic arc here. There is no wise old wizard riding in at the last possible second to gather up the artifacts and fix the grammar of the world. No way. The city doesn't just experience a temporary glitch. It falls into becoming an open, permanent philological laboratory. The will to power, you see, doesn't care at all about equilibrium. It desires more power, more interpretation, and more becoming, even if that means utterly ruining every single fixed meaning we hold dear.
So what's the big takeaway here? It's that what we casually call meaning, what we call truth or law or value, is incredibly, terrifyingly fragile. It is absolutely nothing more than the visible spark produced in the exact, terrifying instant when the drive toward absolute stillness and the drive toward absolute flux are violently forced to collide. Meaning only exists in the friction between the silence that wants to erase all signs and the vortex that refuses to let a single sign settle.
And this brings us right to the Nietzschean idea of eternal recurrence. This chaotic clash of signs, it isn't just a one-and-done event in some fairy tale realm. This friction will return again and again, whenever a civilization gets a little too comfortable and starts believing its absolute truths are somehow safe. So I'm going to leave you with this thought to chew on today. Take a good look around at the structures you rely on. Are your city's measures, your laws, and even your very shadows truly secure against the eternal return of this friction? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.